Welcome to Clinical Lab Chat, part of the MedCore Podcast Network. I'm Qvin Wolski, Director of Business Intelligence for CLP, and today I'll be speaking with Dr. Sara Naseri, co-founder and CEO of women's health company Qvin, about the potential of using menstrual blood for health monitoring and early diagnostics. Now, Sara is a graduate of Denmark's Aarhus University's medical school and has been involved in a number of theoretical research and practical experimentation projects at universities in Europe, the US, and Asia. This is all prior to co-founding Qvin. And she has been recognized for her entrepreneurial work by both the EU and her home country of Denmark. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. So Sara, welcome to Clinical Lab Chat. I'm so glad you're sharing this really intriguing and revolutionary test with our clinical lab listeners. So let's.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. I'm very excited for the
conversation. This is great. When I saw this, when this crossed my desk, I said, this is really. We always talk about cutting edge tests or cutting edge ideas. This really was something. And I said, we need to talk to Sara about this. So, menstrual blood is really considered a nuisance and a waste product by women. And it's just a biological process and irrelevant in many cases for the medical establishment. Now, how did you come up with the idea of using menstrual blood as a way to monitor women's health with this as a background?
Yeah, I mean, so Chris, I was actually in medical school at the time. And of course, I was aware from my own experiences doing clinical work at the time, but also, of course, going through medical school, was aware that, catching things early is important for clinical outcomes for any condition, right? And the challenge really is, how do we catch things early before symptoms arise, where we can really truly be preventative? And at that time, there was all these, newer things happening. You could test your microbiome, and those other, exciting movements of this kind of how getting information about our bodies outside the doctor's office happening. But in my mind, not always very, at the time at least, clinically relevant. And so I really wanted to sort of say, how can we get this information about our bodies outside the doctor's office before symptoms arise regularly, and make sure that it is actually clinically relevant? And of course, blood being the most commonly used bodily fluid for diagnostics, that was on my mind. And then one day it sort of hit me that, hold on a minute, half of the world bleeds every month. Why has nobody used that? And that led me on this journey. The first thing you do, you look at PubMed, what has been published about this topic. And Chris, I was surprised to see how little information that was really out there on the diagnostic utility of menstrual blood.
Yeah.
And so I was puzzled by that, but also intrigued. And that sort of led me on the next, at this point, roughly 10 years of my life, of really understanding what this can do for patients.
Right. And talk about non-invasive, as well. So, I checked out the Qvin device. I went on the website and checked it out, and the design is really interesting because it's familiar, but also familiar in a couple different ways. It's really, I think the packaging is very interesting, etc. Can you explain how the device works, and then also how the test is processed?
Absolutely. I think when we sat down, once we understood the diagnostic utility, and that there certainly is a really interesting opportunity here with utilizing menstrual blood, the next thing was, how do we capture that? And how do we, build a medical device that can conveniently collect a sample and be processed, right? And so wanted to make sure, the moment we ask any patient to collect at home, first of all, it's super important that it's a very simple device that is bulletproof in every way, right? Because we're putting the responsibility in the hands of the patient. And so we wanted to make sure that it really was a simple device. And so we built it. We call it the Q-pad. That's sort of the device. It looks, feels, and is used like a normal menstrual pad. So it's built on organic cotton. It's a menstrual pad, sort of as a function, right? But the difference is that it has embedded a small collection device. So when women use it, like they would use any other menstrual pad, when they, say on average, women probably wear it for 2 to 4 hours. Once they're done, they kind of they pull a little tab that removes that device. You throw away the pad like you would any other pad,
right?
But that little collection device is put in a small container that it keeps the sample stable and is pre-stamped. You throw that in the mailbox and it comes to the lab, we process it, and we give you your results back on a mobile app, so you can sort of see over time how different aspects of your health is changing.
Right, right. And this is, you could do it every month if you wanted to, I guess, or whenever
Yep.
every 3 months or 6 months or however you want to do it. And it sounds like the system is similar, and not to name drop, but it's similar. And we talked about this in the pre-interview a little bit more, like seeing commercials like that Cologuard sort of thing, where you have the little box and you send it, you just put it in the post and you send it on
I
to
would say
the.
the collection device is
Well, it's
different,
different,
but
but
the idea
the
of,
process, yeah,
yeah,
the
yeah, the
process
idea
to
of,
get back to the lab, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, the idea of like, yeah, collecting at home and sending it in this like non-invasive way
Right,
absolutely is
right,
similar.
exactly.
Cologuard.
Okay,
You're very right. Yeah.
okay. All right, so we spoke a little bit about during the pre-interview, a little bit about the taboos that I think you expect and probably are coming up against with the QPAD. There are culture, both in the United States and in other parts of the world, there are cultures where menstrual blood, it's a big taboo. Women are separated. It's really, at least that's my understanding. You're the expert. So how do you overcome deep seated cultural bias involving menstruation? And on the flip side, what does it mean for success? That is, what will overcoming these taboos mean for women's health? So let's talk about both sides. First, the negative. How do you overcome the taboos, those challenges?
Absolutely. You're very right that there is still a stigma and a taboo. I think it is changing, but it still exists, certainly. And
Right.
I think for us, especially early on, it was that barrier. We felt it, certainly. I remember when I left Denmark to come to Stanford University Hospital to do some of this research, and some of my colleagues would look at me and you're testing menstrual blood, and almost like with a sort of, that's gross. And then one of my colleagues actually was about to start a PhD doing feces analysis. So I was like, hey, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
That's
exactly. Yeah,
testing feces, right?
yeah,
But I think the way you overcome that, and I think what we've seen last, all these years working with this is, then at the end of the day, we have to think about how can this be helpful for patients, right?
right,
And so, is there a clinical utility? Can this help make healthcare, and which I really do believe the QPAD can do, is making healthcare accessible, right? How
right,
can we bring healthcare to women all over the world, and frankly, that don't have access to healthcare, or where getting access to healthcare has barriers, right? And
right,
at the end of the day, we look at that and we have to be okay with, even if it's a taboo, it should be about how can we help the patients. And I think that's sort of where I'm coming from with this. And then, of course, as we've been doing the research, we are publishing the data. I think that also helps kind of destigmatize that this is not a waste product. It's not um, a gross thing. It's actually an incredibly valuable opportunity in women's health. And one of
right,
the goals behind this company is of course, first and foremost, to give information to women about their health, and hopefully help them know what's going on, to enable them to be more preventative. But on top of that, to enhance women's health as a whole, in terms of like what we know about different women's health conditions. And then finally, back to this topic of stigma, I really hope that we, with this company, can um can destigmatize menstrual blood, and can sort of change the conversation for generations to come, that this is not a shameful thing. This is actually a huge power.
Now, you come from Denmark. You grew up in Denmark, or you've lived most of your life in Denmark. Went to medical
Yep.
school there. Of course, there's a lot of cultural differences in Central and Northern Europe about health, etc. I think there's a lot less. Get over it. There's kind of a get over it sort of approach. At least that's my experiences. I grew up in a medical household. One of my parents was a medical person, so these kinds of
Yeah.
conversations. This was dinner time conversations. So it always strikes me when there's stigma. But maybe one thing to talk about is, what are you finding what kind of tests can you, or what kind of things can you find out about a woman from her
Yeah.
menstrual blood? What kind of diagnoses can you make?
That's a great question, Chris. And I do think that, we are frankly just scratching the surface of what's possible at this moment in time. What we do know is that menstrual blood, it's blood, right? So we have a
Right,
lot of, a lot of very relevant information in that, but not just blood. It also, it's endometrial tissue, it's vaginal
right,
fluid. So there's actually a little bit less than 400 unique proteins in menstrual blood that are specific to the reproductive organs. So there's a lot of very like interesting potential for diagnoses and information about women's health present. I think again we're just scratching the surface, but I'll give you some examples of basic clinical biomarkers that we have looked at and that we have sort of validated in a clear certified lab here in Menlo Park. And hemoglobin A1C is an example, right? So your average
right.
blood sugar, for diabetics, they have to go in and get blood draws on a regular basis to monitor that. Is also how we diagnose diabetes, right? We know today, and this is partly the QPAD was FDA approved recently, which we're of course very excited
Oh,
about.
that's great.
Yeah, we received FDA clearance, and it was specifically for the device, of course, but also for hemoglobin A1C. So we definitely know
Mm,
that we can monitor your hemoglobin, your average blood sugar levels, as well as if you were to go in and get a venipuncture, right? So that's
right,
an example of a clinically relevant biomarker where women can get access to that just by having their period, which they're having anyway. So
right,
super super awesome. And then other examples include thyroid hormone, fertility hormones like AMH, LH, and FSH,
right.
hemoglobin. We've published on a number of these already, and I think another one that I'm very excited about, I think is a very important one actually, is screening for cervical cancer. Right, we have a cancer that still today kills more than 300,000 women every year, and it's a cancer that is entirely preventable. And so
Right.
how do we make screening accessible to women? And we have very very encouraging data to show that we can essentially screen for this cancer by just having women wear a
Yeah.
modified menstrual pad.
Yeah.
At
Is
this
that
point,
something?
why not? And so
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities. These are some of the examples.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of those kind of tests that women are interested as well, and some of which are pretty, my understanding is are pretty, can be pretty invasive,
Yeah.
uh, particularly like fertility testing in some cases.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So you talked about your, congratulations, you're FDA approved. So is the test available? And where are you in the process of I know it's not, it's not on every shelf, but where are you in the process of scaling up so it's available both for women and also for labs to process? When can are labs going to be able to add this to their menu of testing options?
Yeah, we are sort of, so the clearance came just at the beginning of this year. We announced it, and so at this point, you can certainly you can purchase the QPAD. It's on our website,
Right.
Qvin.com, and we have sort of a small batch available. And I'd say sort of on our end right now, it's really about kind of ramping up production so that we can make bigger batches available. But as of right now, you can go in and purchase the QPAD. In terms of sort of partnerships and working with labs, we'd love to hear from labs that are interested in this technology, and would yeah, definitely encourage to reach out.
Yeah.
We our goal is to again make healthcare accessible. We want to reach women across the country and eventually even globally. And I think we are completely aware that that's not something we do on our own. So we welcome and encourage and really hope that there is good partnerships, and especially laboratories that would be
Yeah.
interested in working together on this.
Yeah, I could see a lot of organizations that you could also work with, NGOs overseas, places here in the
Exactly.
United States, like Planned Parenthood, et cetera,
Oh,
that
absolutely.
are working very, very hard to have accessibility for a lot of women's health services.
Exactly.
Um, all right, so let's back up a little bit, because you've been an entrepreneur for a long time, and it sounds like we talked about this in the pre-interview, kind of an accidental entrepreneur. We talked about that you're from Denmark and being an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, and being an inventor and such, that isn't something that's like, I guess, in the zeitgeist or the cultural atmosphere, I guess. So when you were a teenager, you developed a chemical compound that would absorb 99% of UV. Now, this a little, we're getting a little off the clinical lab side of things, but I think this also really is interesting about where you're coming from and how outside of the box thinking is really interesting or really important for medical personnel. Now, does it surprise you that you followed this entrepreneurial path? I think I already kind of answered it for you. And would you encourage young scientists and medical people like yourself to pursue out of the box approaches to diagnostic problems?
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely encourage that. I think for me, I did not in I did not predict that I would be, going on this path of entrepreneurship and running my own company. And I will say it was not a dream of mine, as we also talked. It
Right,
was not. I did not grow up dreaming about moving to Silicon Valley and and becoming an entrepreneur. That was never my dream. I think the accidental part really was. It came from a place of I see the problem. So at that point it was skin cancer, and I had experiences in my life with cases of that, and it bothered me deeply and it moved me, and I wanted to. In my mind it was like we must be able to do better. How can we prevent this? And that it really came from that of like problem solving. How can we improve
right,
this particular issue that means something to me personally, right?
right.
And that sort of I think when you have that, when you find something that you really want to change and in this world, then it really it makes it very it comes like it's like an internal passion almost that you can't stop. And I think that helps when you then go out and you sort of try to execute on it. And there's a lot of barriers in that journey, but I think because it was just it was rooted in a passion to solve particular problems, it made it almost impossible not to, right? And so
Yeah,
that was my experience. And I think yeah, definitely not something I would have predicted that I would sort of be here in time, in time, and
yeah,
sort of
and then you moved on to now the QPAD, and you founded a company, and it's it kind of it seems like really be open to serendipity, I guess. Be open. Be I guess being open to these ideas flooding in, and then doing something with them. Maybe that's the lesson. I don't know. So
I think so, and I definitely think we need medical professionals to think outside of the box, right? Because we
yeah,
need, there's so much we can improve on, frankly, and we need input from medical professionals. And I think I remember one time being on a panel and we were sort of discussing why medical professionals may not be as you know likely to jump into something like this, and I think. Medical professionals actually have a lot of the characteristics that are very helpful in
yeah,
pursuing and building companies. And so I think it's very important that we encourage that. I do think
yeah,
that my experience with living in America is, and especially I mean this area that we live in here in San Francisco, is that there is a lot of that sort of drive and from medical professionals and in general. But let's get the rest of the world and country, and
yeah.
the more the better. Every person in
Uh,
my mind has ideas, and that are valuable, and it's about believing in them, and then of course finding an issue that you're passionate about.
right, for sure, absolutely. So what's next for Qvin, and what's next for you?
Yeah, I mean those are somewhat the same in my mind, right? Like
Yeah, probably.
I
Yeah.
think well, I'm we're very excited on a personal level for the entire Qvin team that are working hard on this every day. Of course, very very excited that the FDA clearance came through. It's the first
Right.
kind. I think it's a big moment for us, but it's certainly a big moment for women's health, right? And
Yeah.
so at this point, it's really about now that we've shown that there is clinical utility in menstrual blood. We've shown that the QPAD collects it and it keeps it stable and it's consistent. And at the same can sort of replace for something like hemoglobin A1C a venipuncture. It's really about like how do we actually bring this incredible innovation to women and really make healthcare accessible and convenient for them to get information about their bodies on a regular basis. And so
Yeah.
the next step is really cracking that part of
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Well, I think this might be coming at a good time too because of COVID. We've all, I'm sure you have, I have, we've
yeah,
all taken little tests, and we know how to do tests at home.
yeah,
I mean, this test is. I do encourage listeners, whether you're a medical people or not, who are listening to this, to go onto the Qvin website. That's qvin.com, right?
that's correct.
And check it out because it's really it is probably the simplest test you could do. I mean, it's just, I mean, there's one little not exactly exciting part that you have to do, but for the most part, it looks like a pretty collection is simple. Sending it out is simple. It seems like a pretty simple process, which adds to access. Which adds, this is something I talk a lot about. This is something I'm interested in is healthcare access for everyone. We talked about it in the Lancet uh, survey that was done a couple of years ago. 40% of the people in the world can't even get basic tests. Diagnoses are responsible for 70% of treatment decisions.
Yeah.
That's, you're missing out a lot. There's a lot of people suffering needlessly, and for simple things like they can't get A1s, and this is basic stuff. This was like A1C tests and things of that sort.
Yeah.
This seems like this is just really. I mean, you might have found a really great way to add to accessibility and really meet that goal. So
That's the goal. That's the goal. I will
yeah,
say we've probably tested more than 1,000 women at this point, Chris. Part of the FDA clearance, you run usability testing, right? And I think one of the things
right,
that was really interesting, there are requirements in terms of what, the information instruction booklet should be for the patient that is collecting at home. And one of the feedbacks that we got from women were like, well, this is so simple. I know how to use a menstrual pad. You don't need to
right,
and that really, I
yeah.
think for the team working really hard every day on this, it was kind of a great moment in time to be like, we've built a very simple way to collect blood. It,
Yeah. I mean, as you said, no brainer. I mean,
it's a
really,
no-brainer.
it's really interesting. I really do encourage everyone to go on the website and check it out. I mean, whether you're a man or a woman, I mean, I find it really fascinating just in terms of as a collection device. It was just really fascinating and a heck of a lot less painful than I guess simpler than a Venus punt. I wouldn't say painful,
or a
but
pap smear,
but
right? Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, pap smear, yeah. So right, so there you go. So well, this is a very excellent conversation. I really enjoyed this, and unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time. Sara, thanks again so much for sharing about your work and your background. I am really encouraged by this and your quest for accessibility for women's health, and which I think is a really important issue. And I can't wait to see what you do next. Keep me informed. You and your team keep me informed, and maybe we'll have you back on the show again. And I also want to thank you, the laboratory audience, for listening. Look for more episodes of Clinical Lab Chat in the future, and visit us online at clpmag.com and on all of the major social media platforms. So until next time, be well.